my name's Daniel. I'm 67 years old, and for the last 45 years, I've been married to a woman named Margaret. We met at a bus stop in Dayton, Ohio, back in '77. I was on my way to an apprenticeship interview at a factory that doesn't even exist anymore, and she was heading to the university library with a thermos full of licorice tea. She wore this oversized tan cardigan with wooden buttons and carried an old leather satchel stuffed with note cards. I remember her eyes, green, like summer grass after rain. That's how it started. We built a life together in Louisville, Kentucky, in a modest split-level ranch house on Elmwood Circle. It had those ugly popcorn ceilings, and the kitchen was stuck in 1982 with avocado green cabinets. But it was ours. We raised 2 sons there, got into arguments over stupid things like whether the towels should be folded in thirds or halves. We planted dogwoods in the yard, repainted the front porch 3 times, and never agreed on what to name the stray cat that kept showing up. Now the boys are grown. One's in Seattle, the other in Charlotte. They visit when they can, but it's not often. Margaret stayed active, teaching American Lit at a local community college, helping with book drives, mentoring students. I retired early after working 30 years in HVAC, started refinishing furniture in the garage to keep my hands busy. Lately, I've been working on a cherrywood coffee table I'll probably never sell. Everything seemed steady, if a little quiet. She still read every night, usually curled up on the brown corduroy recliner in the living room with a blanket over her knees. I'd make us both peppermint tea around 9, and we'd sit together without talking much, just the hum of the fridge, the occasional car rolling down the street. But things changed when she got promoted last year. It wasn't a big ceremony or anything. She just came home one night, tossed her keys in the ceramic dish by the door, and said, "They made me head of the department." She looked happy, proud even. I hugged her, congratulated her. We opened a bottle of Riesling and ordered Thai takeout. After that, the travel started. Conferences in Milwaukee, then Baltimore, then somewhere in California. Nothing unusual at first. I mean, she'd always been passionate about her job, and I supported her completely. Hell, I was proud. While I tinkered with wood glue and sandpaper in the garage, she was out there making a difference, right? But slowly, the vibe shifted. She came home from a trip to San Diego in February and didn't kiss me when she walked through the door. Just set down her roller bag and said, "God, I need a shower." Her coat smelled faintly of some cologne I didn't recognize, something sharp, musky, not like her usual vanilla amber stuff from Bath and Body Works. I stood in the kitchen stirring leftover chili on the stove, pretending not to notice, but I felt it in my gut. She started working late in her home office, sitting behind the oak desk we bought from a church thrift store years ago. She'd close the door more often. I'd bring her tea and catch a glimpse of her laptop screen, emails, Zoom calls, sometimes her fingers hovering nervously over her phone like she was waiting for something. I remember one night in March. It was raining, the kind of slow, steady drizzle that makes the whole house feel sleepy. I was reading a Clive Cussler paperback, waiting for her to come downstairs, when I heard her whispering on the phone. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. She said something like, "Yeah, I miss you too," followed by silence. I told myself it was work-related. Maybe a stressed-out student, maybe a friend. Anything but what it sounded like. But then there was the look in her eyes. Every time I asked how her day went, they flickered for half a second, like a candle fighting wind. Not sadness. Not guilt. Something else. Distance, maybe. Detachment. And still, I didn't say anything. I wanted to believe it was just stress, the new role, too many late nights and faculty politics. I wanted to believe that she was still my Margaret, the woman who once drove across town in a snowstorm just to bring me soup when I had the flu. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't even know what it was yet. I sat there one night with my hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, staring at the empty recliner across from me, and realized She wasn't really coming home anymore. Just visiting. The next morning, I woke up alone. Not that Margaret had left or anything, she was still upstairs, sleeping, I guess, but it felt like waking up alone. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest like humidity. I made my way down the hall in my slippers, the worn-out ones she got me from Coles 3 Christmases ago. The left one flaps when I walk. I brewed a pot of dark roast, Sumatra blend, the only kind I drink. She prefers light roast, but we haven't made a full pot together in months. I used to pour her a cup without asking. Now I don't even bother. She usually just grabs her thermos and leaves before I've had a chance to say good morning. I stood by the window, looking out at the backyard. The birdbath we got at that estate sale in Richmond still had a crack running down the middle. I never fixed it. Don't know why. Just one of those things I always meant to do. That morning, I watched a blue jay land on it, shake off some rain, and fly off again without touching the water. Something about that hit me harder than it should have. By the time Margaret came downstairs, it was after 9. She was wearing those slate grey pants from Taylor and a light blue blouse I'd never seen before. Her hair was still damp from the shower, pulled back in a loose bun. She smelled like that same sharp cologne. It clung to the air like static. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. She nodded, barely glancing at me, and started rummaging through the cabinet for granola bars. "Do we have any of the cranberry ones left?" I shook my head. "Just the almond." She sighed. Not angry. Just inconvenienced. Like I'd failed some small test without realizing it. "I'll grab something on the way," she muttered, tossing her phone, an iPhone 14 Pro in a rose gold case, into her purse. I looked at her then, really looked. The crease between her brows was deeper than it used to be. Her eyes, once always searching mine for connection, now seemed focused somewhere far behind me, like I wasn't even in the room. "Everything all right?" I asked. She paused for half a second. "Yeah, just busy." Busy. That word again. It's like a wall people build when they don't want you to ask what's really going on. She left soon after. I watched her back out of the driveway in her Subaru Outback, the one with the dent in the rear bumper she never got fixed. When the taillights disappeared down Chestnut Hill Road, I stood there, unmoving, holding my mug like it weighed 10 pounds. Something was wrong. I knew it in my bones. Around noon, I went into her office. I hadn't done that in a while. She always kept it neat, almost compulsively so. There was a faint smell of her lotion, lavender and something else I couldn't place. Her MacBook was closed on the desk, next to a legal pad covered in her slanted handwriting. At first glance, it was just lecture notes. But then I saw a name scribbled in the margins. Elliot. Twice. No last name. No context. I sat down in her chair. The cushion was still warm from the morning. I stared at that name until the letters blurred. My stomach turned, not because I knew something for sure, but because deep down I already did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept watching the hallway light spill in under the bedroom door. She was in there, sleeping soundly, breathing evenly. I was in the guest room, on the old mattress that creaked every time I shifted. At around 3 a.m., I got up. Poured myself some orange juice from the fridge. The light buzzed overhead, flickering just a bit. The silence in the house felt like static, sharp and heavy. I opened her laptop. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But I did. She hadn't logged out of her email. My hands were shaking as I clicked through. Most of it was mundane, student updates, faculty memos, online shopping receipts. Then I saw the subject line. Miss you already. I clicked. It was from someone named Elliot Grant. His email address ended in .edu. The message was short. Last night was more than I expected. Can't stop thinking about it. Same time next month? Below that, a string of messages. Some deleted, others archived. Words like hotel, conference, late flight, and then? I wish I'd met you sooner. I closed the laptop. Sat there in the dark, listening to the tick of the wall clock above the sink. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding in that slow, heavy way that makes your arms feel numb. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I just sat there with one thought circling my brain like a vulture. This is really happening. The next morning, I didn't wake up, I just stood up. I hadn't slept at all. The guest room window faced east, and the sunlight was already creeping in through the cheap white blinds. Everything felt artificial, the birds chirping outside, the smell of toast from a neighbor's house, the ticking wall clock above the dresser. I hadn't moved all night, just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet and thinking about what I'd seen on her laptop. I remember looking at the pattern in the rug, little navy diamonds against a beige background. I'd vacuumed it hundreds of times. Now I felt like I was seeing it for the first time, or maybe like it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My beard had grown in uneven overnight. My eyes were bloodshot. I looked smaller. Like someone had deflated me. Margaret was already in the kitchen by the time I made it down the stairs. She had on a pale pink hoodie and black leggings. Her hair was tied up again. She was scrolling through her phone while a piece of wheat toast slowly browned in the toaster. When she saw me, she gave a little half-smile. "Hey," she said casually, like it was just another day. "Morning," I managed. She poured herself a cup of coffee, light roast, hazelnut cream, and took a sip while still reading something on her screen. Her phone case had a little chip near the volume button. I hadn't noticed that before. It's strange what your brain starts picking up on when your heart's on high alert. "Big plans today?" I asked, trying to sound normal. "Staff meeting at 10, she said, setting her mug down. "Then I've got office hours till 2. I might run some errands after that." She always gave too much detail when she was hiding something. Over-explaining. It was her tell. I nodded slowly, watching the toaster pop. She grabbed her toast, didn't butter it, just ate it dry like she was in a rush. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam the mug on the floor, shout, "Who the hell is Elliot?" and watch her face shatter like a window in a windstorm. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I stood there in my flannel pajama pants and said, "I might do some sanding in the garage." She didn't respond. Just nodded vaguely and left the kitchen. I waited till I heard the front door click shut. Waited till I saw her Subaru pull out of the driveway. Then I sat down at the table and just breathed. Long, shaky breaths. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed gravel. That afternoon, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Ben Kessler. He was an old buddy from work, back when I was still crawling through attics installing ductwork. We weren't super close, but I remembered he'd gone through a nasty divorce a few years back. His wife had cheated on him with her spin instructor, of all people. I figured if anyone knew what this felt like, it'd be Ben. He picked up on the third ring. "Dan?" His voice sounded surprised. "Everything all right?" "No," I said. "Not really." We met at a Waffle House off I-65. It was one of those faded ones with flickering fluorescent lights and sticky booths. I ordered black coffee. He got a sausage melt and hash browns. We didn't talk much at first. Just chewed and stared at the Formica table like it might offer answers. Finally, I said it. I think Margaret's having an affair. He didn't flinch. Just nodded slowly, like he'd seen this movie before. She cheating on you, or are you guessing? I told him everything. The emails. The name. The tone. Her distance. Her lies. When I was done, he leaned back and exhaled. Damn. That's rough, man. I nodded, unable to speak. You confront her yet? Not yet. I wanted to be sure. He stirred his coffee with the end of his knife. You sure? You just don't want to admit it. That hit hard. It was true. I'd known since the moment I read the words "same time next month." My heart knew before my brain allowed it. What did you do when it happened to you? I asked. He shrugged. Drank too much. Screamed a lot. Then I moved out and started over. Do you regret it? Ben looked me straight in the eye. Not for a second. You can't build trust again on the ashes of a lie, Dan. You'll kill yourself trying. That stuck with me. We sat in silence for another 10 minutes. Then we paid the check and left. Driving home, the sky looked bruised, purple clouds smeared across a pale orange sunset. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ben said. About the ashes. About the killing yourself part. When I got home, the house was dark. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I sat on the couch, flicked on the lamp, and stared at the family photo hanging above the fireplace. Thanksgiving 2009. The boys were still teens. Margaret had her hand on my shoulder. And I remember thinking, that hand had touched someone else. That hand had held someone else. I didn't know where she was that night. She said she had errands. Maybe she was with him. All I knew was the toast was still in the sink. Dry. Uneaten. And something in me broke a little more. I didn't sleep again that night. My body ached from the tension, like every joint was clenched in place. I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, creaking every so often. I kept waiting to hear the front door open. It never did. At 3:18 a.m., I walked into our bedroom. It felt like trespassing. The air still held the scent of Margaret's lotion, lavender and sandalwood. Her side of the bed was made perfectly, the throw blanket folded into a tight square. She hadn't slept there. Not that night. Maybe not for a while. I hadn't noticed before because I'd stopped going in. I stood there in the dark and tried to picture where she might be. I thought of the name in those emails, Elliot, and pictured a hotel room. Beige walls, crisp white sheets, a half-finished bottle of red wine on the dresser. Him, probably younger than me, maybe smug. I could see her laughing, maybe touching his hand lightly. The image twisted my stomach. By morning, I couldn't stay in the house. The silence was starting to hum, like it had its own frequency, one only I could hear. I needed air, or space, or just something to take me away from the walls we built together. So I drove. No destination in mind. Just got into my old Chevy Silverado, turned the ignition, and headed north out of Louisville. I passed the gas station with the broken ice machine, the Dollar General with the crooked E on the sign. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of an old diner just off Route 60, about 40 minutes from home. Ernie's place. I hadn't been there in years. It was still exactly the same. Brown vinyl booths, cracked linoleum floors, a jukebox that played 60s country hits that nobody requested. The waitress behind the counter looked like she'd been working there since Nixon. Her name tag said Janice. I sat at the far end of the counter, facing the kitchen window where steam rose and the smell of bacon hung thick in the air. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, voice like gravel. She poured it without another word. I didn't bother with cream. I sat there sipping it, staring into the cup like it held some kind of answer. The couple in the booth across from me were laughing softly. Probably in their 40s. She reached across the table and touched his arm, eyes soft. My chest tightened. I looked away. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally pulled out my phone. I hovered over Margaret's name in my contacts. The last text from her had been the night before, "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." I typed and deleted at least 5 different messages. Then, finally, I sent, "We need to talk. Tonight. I need answers." She didn't respond for an hour. When she did, all she said was, "Okay. I'll be home around 7. I left the diner without finishing my coffee. Drove home in silence. The kind where you don't even notice the radio's off. When 7 p.m. came, I was already sitting in the living room, lights low, TV off. Just me and the creak of the floorboards. At 7:06, her car pulled into the driveway. She walked in wearing that beige trench coat she only puts on for important meetings. Her hair was perfect. Her lips were pressed together like she'd been rehearsing. "Hey," she said, voice light. "Fake. You said you wanted to talk?" I didn't answer right away. I motioned toward the couch across from me. She sat, clutching her purse in her lap like it was armor. "You want to tell me where you were last night?" I asked. She blinked. "I told you, I had errands." "That last 8 hours?" She didn't answer. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I went into your office. I saw your emails." Elliot Grant. That name ring a bell? She stiffened. Her hands tightened around the strap of her purse. "You went through my computer?" "You lied to me," I snapped. "For how long, Margaret? How long has this been going on?" She looked down. "Since January." 8 months, I whispered. 8 goddamn months. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quickly. "It started with work. He was on the curriculum committee. We were just talking. Then? I don't know. It got personal." "You don't know?" I said, my voice shaking. "You don't know how you started sleeping with someone who isn't your husband?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not pity. Not sadness. Just a hollow ache behind my ribs. "I was lonely," she said quietly. "You always in the garage. You never look at me anymore." I stood. Walked to the window. The street was quiet. Our neighbor's porch light flickered. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and went silent. "I looked at you every day," I said, still facing away. "But you were already gone." She said nothing. Just sat there with her guilt like a coat she couldn't take off. "I want you out," I said finally. "Tonight." She gasped. "Dan, please." "No," I turned around. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She left 20 minutes later with a duffel bag and her purse. No tears. No goodbye. When the door closed behind her, I locked it. Then I turned off every light in the house. And I sat in the dark, breathing like I was learning how for the first time. The house felt dead after she left. Not quiet, dead. There's a difference. Quiet is peaceful. Dead is empty. I walked through the rooms like I was in a museum of someone else's life. Everything still smelled like her. Her perfume lingered in the hallway. Her hairbrush was still on the bathroom sink, a few strands of chestnut hair caught in the bristles. I stood in front of it for a long time. It felt like a piece of her, like evidence. I ended up in the kitchen, standing in front of the open fridge, not even hungry. I grabbed a beer, some cheap lager I'd had in there for months, and sat at the table. The same table where we used to have Sunday morning pancakes, or where she'd grade papers while I sanded wood in the garage. Now it just felt like a slab of wood between me and everything I didn't want to feel. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it, debating whether to pick up. Finally, I did. "Is this Daniel?" a woman's voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name's Mara Grant." I think my husband's been seeing your wife." I didn't say anything. The name hit like a brick. Grant. As in Elliot Grant. "I found your number in his call log," she continued. "I don't know how much you know, but I needed to talk to someone." My throat felt tight. "Yeah. I know." She exhaled. "Jesus." There was a long pause. "I just needed to know if I was crazy," she said. "Or if someone else was out there feeling as insane as I do right now." "You're not crazy," I said. "And you're definitely not alone." We talked for almost an hour. She told me everything. How she'd noticed Elliot staying late at work more often. How he'd started locking his phone. How she finally cracked his passcode and found texts. Hundreds of them. Pictures, too. One of them in a hotel room, Margaret in a black dress, Elliot shirtless behind her, arm around her waist. I felt sick. "They met up in Chicago, Dallas, New Orleans," she said. "Always during conferences. He told me he needed space. I just didn't know it was because he was playing house with someone else's wife." "Did he admit it?" I asked. "Eventually. Said it just happened, like people just fall into affairs by accident." Her laugh was bitter, sharp. "Same thing she told me," I muttered. We were silent again. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "What are you going to do?" "I already told her to leave," I said. "She's gone." "You think that's it?" "No," I said quietly. "I think it's just starting." That night, I sat on the couch with the beer still half finished on the coffee table. The TV was on, some rerun of a cooking show, but I wasn't watching it. I was staring at a photo of us on the mantel, Christmas 3 years ago. Margaret was wearing a red sweater, standing beside me with her hand on my chest. The boys were there too, laughing about something. We looked like a normal, happy family. That picture used to comfort me. Now it felt like a lie. I picked it up, turned it over. There was a sticky note on the back in her handwriting, "A best Christmas ever. Love you forever. M." I wanted to throw it. Smash it. Instead, I set it down gently, face down. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and searched for Elliot Grant. It didn't take long. His faculty profile was on the university's website. PhD in Education Policy. Focused on curriculum innovation. Smiling face, blue tie, arms crossed like a damn poster boy for betrayal. Then I found his LinkedIn. His Twitter. His blog. All full of inspirational quotes and leadership mantras. I scrolled through them with growing disgust. That's when an idea started forming in my mind. A cold, clear one. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or drive to his house and make a scene. I was going to be smarter than that. This man had a reputation. A career. He presented at national conferences. He advised academic boards. He wrote papers on ethics in education. Ethics. I pulled up my email and started typing. Subject line, "A professional conduct concern, Elliot Grant." I sent the first email to his university's Human Resources Department. Then another to the Dean of Faculty. Then one more, anonymously, to the regional education board he worked with. I attached screenshots Mara had sent me of the messages. The hotel booking confirmations. The calendar invites labeled committee debrief that matched dates he was actually in hotels with my wife. I didn't write a word of commentary. Just the facts. Let them draw their own conclusions. By the time I was done, the clock read 2:47 a.m. I shut the laptop and leaned back. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt still. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning in questions. I had done something. Something real. Something that might cost him what he thought he could have without consequences. He took something from me. Now I'd taken something from him. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning, the world felt strangely normal. Birds chirped outside. A delivery truck rolled down the street. A neighbor waved as I brought the trash bin to the curb. Everything looked the same: blue sky, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes like it was just another Thursday in the suburbs. But inside me, something had shifted. Margaret texted around 9 a.m., "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Tonight. 8 p.m. You can come by for a conversation." That's it. I spent the day in a kind of mechanical fog. I sanded an old cedar bench in the garage. Listened to some blues on vinyl. Tried to eat, but couldn't get past a few spoonfuls of soup. My stomach felt like it was folding in on itself. At 7:45, I made coffee. Black, strong, no sugar. Just like always. I set 2 mugs on the table out of habit, then shook my head and put one away. At 8:04, headlights appeared in the driveway. She knocked twice, then opened the door like she still lived here. I stayed seated. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time: our photos, the worn armchair she used to curl up in, the faint smell of varnish from the garage. "Thanks for letting me come," she said. She wore dark jeans and a navy blouse. Her hair was down, curled slightly at the ends. She'd put on makeup, like this was an interview. Or maybe an audition. "You've got 20 minutes, I said. "Then I want you gone." She swallowed, walked slowly to the other side of the table, and Saturday. She didn't reach for the coffee. Just stared at her hands, thumbs pressing into each other. "I don't even know where to begin," she said quietly. "Try the truth." She nodded. Her voice trembled. "It started last year. At a curriculum summit in Denver. We were both there, Elliot and I. It was late, we'd had wine after a panel. We talked, just talked for hours. I hadn't connected with someone like that in a long time." My jaw tightened. "You were married. That's what connecting is for." She flinched but kept going. "I didn't sleep with him that night. But something changed. We started emailing, texting. At first, it was about work. Then it wasn't. It felt safe. Like this pocket of life outside all the noise." "You mean outside your husband?" I snapped. She closed her eyes. "Yes." There was a pause, heavy and sharp. "The kind where you feel every breath like sandpaper." "And then?" I asked. 6 months ago, in Chicago. That was the first time it turned physical. After that, it just kept happening. Conferences. Hotel rooms. I thought I could control it. End it. But I didn't. I kept choosing it. "You chose it." "Every single time," I said, voice low. She nodded slowly. "I know." I stared at her. This woman I'd spent most of my adult life with. The mother of my children. The person who used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, who kissed my forehead when I had migraines, who once cried in my arms when our dog passed away. Now she was just a stranger wearing a familiar face. Why him? I asked. Her lip trembled. He listened. Made me feel seen. Like I mattered. I slammed my hand on the table. I saw you every goddamn day, Margaret. I cooked for you. Rubbed your back when your joints ached. Sat in silence beside you when you didn't have words. I gave you everything. And you gave it away to a man in a conference room. She didn't cry. Not yet. Just nodded, slowly, as if she'd rehearsed this pain. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. I just didn't want to leave things unsaid. Oh, there's still plenty unsaid, I muttered. Like how long you were planning to keep this up. Or what lies you told when you looked me in the eyes. She wiped her face now. One tear. Maybe two. I thought about telling you 100 times, she whispered. But I was afraid. I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the moment you lied, I said. Not when you slept with him. Not even when you texted him I wish I'd met you sooner. No. You lost me when you came home, kissed me, and told me everything was fine. Her face crumbled. And for a second, I almost felt something. But I didn't. I stood up. Walked toward the door and opened it. That's your 20 minutes. She stood too, looking smaller now. Dan? I'm sorry. I'm sure you are, I said, stepping aside. She looked like she wanted to say more, but then her eyes shifted. She saw the laptop on the coffee table. Open to an email thread. Her expression changed. You told them, she asked. Every one of them. HR. The board. The ethics committee. Her face went pale. You ended us, Margaret. You don't get to keep your comfort zone intact. She didn't argue. Just nodded again. Slowly. Like her whole world was sinking. And then she walked out, into the night. I shut the door, locked it, and for the first time in days, exhaled like a man who'd been underwater too long. Not because it was over. But because I was done waiting to be saved. A week passed. She didn't come back. Didn't call. Didn't text. No dramatic voicemails begging for a second chance. No carefully crafted emails with quotes from therapy blogs about forgiveness and healing. Just silence. At first, it felt like relief. Then, like absence. The kind that settles into the bones. I'd sit at the kitchen table, drinking black coffee that had gone lukewarm, and stare at the empty seat across from me. Her chair. The one with the worn cushion and a faint mark where she always tucked one leg underneath. Every now and then I'd catch myself turning to tell her something, some memory that popped up, a funny line in a show, an update from one of the boys, and then I'd stop mid-sentence, speaking only to the air. One evening, I opened the fridge and saw her almond milk on the top shelf. I almost threw it out. Almost. But I didn't. I closed the fridge and left it there. Spoiling. Like everything else. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, I got a call. Blocked number. I answered out of habit. Mr. Hawkins, a man's voice asked. Yes. This is Dr. Malay from the university's Office of Faculty Affairs. I just wanted to inform you that following the investigation, Professor Elliot Grant has been placed on administrative leave pending a formal review. I sat down slowly. The edge of the couch groaned beneath me. Was the complaint anonymous? I asked. Yes, he said. But your name came up. In relation to your wife. Ex-wife, I thought. Though no papers had been signed yet. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the muted television, where a weather report rolled on about a cold front moving in from St. Louis. None of it registered. My ears rang. My hands tingled. I had done it. The man who slipped into my life like a ghost, who stole my wife's attention, her time, her touch, I had yanked the ground out from under him. And yet I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired. Later that night, I got an email. From Mara. He's packing his things. Said he's going to stay with his brother in Michigan for a while. HR told him his faculty appointment is under review. I just wanted to say thank you. Not because it fixes anything, but because I didn't want him to get away with it. Hope you're okay. I stared at the message for a long time. Reread it. Typed a reply. Deleted it. Eventually, I wrote back, I'm not okay. But I'm getting there. One day at a time. She replied 2 minutes later. Same. That night, I pulled out an old cardboard box from the top shelf in the hall closet. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Me and Margaret at a pumpkin patch in '98. Her laughing on the deck in a red flannel shirt, holding a hot dog in one hand and a beer in the other. Our boys, back when they were small and everything felt big. Vacations. Birthdays. The ordinary, priceless stuff. I looked through each one like I was reading a book I knew by heart but didn't trust anymore. She was everywhere. In every frame, every angle. Her smile, her eyes, the way she always tilted her head slightly to the left when someone took her picture. And yet, I couldn't find the woman who'd lied to me. Cheated on me. That version of her didn't exist here. I took out a lighter from the junk drawer. Set it on the table. Sat back. I didn't light anything. I just wanted to see how far I'd go. The next morning, I packed up most of her things. Boxed them carefully. Her books. Her records. Her scarves, still smelling like that citrus perfume mix she wore in spring. I set them by the front door and texted her. Your things are ready. Come get them today or I'm donating the whole lot. She responded 5 minutes later. I'll be by at 6. And she was. She didn't say a word when she walked in. Just nodded once and started moving boxes to her car. I watched from the kitchen, sipping my coffee, leaning against the counter. On her final trip out, she paused in the doorway. You not going to say anything? She asked. I stared at her for a long time. No, I said. I already did. Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. Okay. Then she left. The door shut softly behind her. No slam. No drama. Just, final. After she drove off, I opened all the windows in the house. It was cold. Late October chill biting at my arms. But I wanted the air to change. I wanted every last trace of her scent gone. I threw away the almond milk. Changed the bedsheets. Deleted her from my phone. I didn't cry. Not that day. Instead, I sat down in my workshop and started sanding a new project. A bench, maybe. Or a bookshelf. I wasn't sure yet. But the wood was clean. Fresh. Untouched. And for the first time in a long while, so was I. 3 weeks passed. The air had shifted. Cold settled in. The trees dropped the last of their leaves, blanketing the yard in a damp, rust-colored carpet. Mornings started later now. The light was soft, gray, reluctant to show up at all. Every breath outside felt like it carried a little weight with it. I'd fallen into a routine, one that barely resembled the life I had before. Mornings began with 2 eggs over easy, toast with too much butter, and black coffee that never stayed hot long enough. I stopped watching the news. I didn't care who was arguing on Capitol Hill or what scandal was unraveling on the nightly anchor script. I didn't need more noise. I had enough in my own head. I'd spend hours in the garage sanding, cutting, measuring, sometimes just staring at a piece of wood like it might tell me what the hell I was supposed to do next. I'd leave the door cracked open to let the cold in. It helped me feel something. The sting in my fingers reminded me I was still here. Still standing. People asked questions, of course. Friends. Neighbors. The barista at the coffee shop downtown who noticed Margaret stopped showing up for her Wednesday cappuccinos. I didn't say much. Just enough to shut down the conversation. She moved out, I'd say. No one ever asked why. One afternoon, I got a letter. A real one. In the mail. Handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of cream-colored stationery with Margaret's handwriting, familiar loops, soft pressure. Daniel. I know you don't want to hear from me. I won't make excuses. I won't ask for anything. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Not just for the affair. For all of it. For pulling away. For letting the silence grow. For looking elsewhere when I should have turned to you. I miss the way you said my name when you were half asleep. I miss Sunday mornings and the sound of the saw in the garage. But mostly I miss the way you looked at me like I mattered. I hope one day you can remember the good things, too. I read it 3 times. Then I slid it into the back of a drawer and didn't touch it again. Some things aren't meant to be burned or answered. Some things just have to sit quietly until the ache dulls. Later that night, I drove to the river. The Ohio flowed slow and wide, reflecting the city lights like soft ripples of memory. I parked in the empty lot near the old train bridge and walked down the path, past the benches, past the empty docks. I sat on the end of the pier, watching the water. It smelled like wet stone and iron and something earthy, like the river itself had been carrying secrets for 100 years. I thought about the years. About how many of them we'd spent together. About how many things I thought I'd never survive, job layoffs, the miscarriage, her dad's funeral, my back surgery. We'd gotten through all of it. Or so I thought. I realized I wasn't mourning her. Not really. I was mourning us. The we that used to be automatic. The way she'd pass me the salt without me asking. The way I'd reach for her hand in the movie theater and she'd already be reaching back. The little things no one sees. The things that don't make it into divorce paperwork. And maybe that's the part no one warns you about. It's not the betrayal that undoes you. It's the absence of everything else. I sat there for a long time. Until my hands went numb from the cold. Until my breath looked like smoke. Until the stars blinked through the clouds and the streetlights began to shut off, one by one. When I finally stood up, I felt lighter. Not better. Not healed. But lighter. Like I'd put something down I'd been carrying for far too long. I got home just after midnight. Made tea. Sat in the chair by the window and watched the lights across the street blink in patterns I'd never noticed before. I pulled out my notebook. The one I hadn't touched since before everything fell apart. I wrote one line on the first page. I'm still here. It wasn't profound. But it was true. The next morning, I opened the windows again. Not to air out her memory. But to let in the world. Because for the first time in a long while, I wanted to feel the wind on my face. I wanted to smell the morning and hear the neighbor's dog bark and know that even though I was alone, I was alive. November passed in a slow crawl of cold mornings and early nights. The porch light clicked on before I even thought about dinner. I started wearing the same gray flannel jacket every day, the one Margaret used to joke made me look like a retired lumberjack. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing needed to match. No one was watching. I spent Thanksgiving alone. The boys were both out of state, Jason in Charlotte with his wife's family, and Mark up in Seattle, buried in a work deadline. They offered to fly me out, but I told them not to bother. Next year, I'd said. Just enjoy yourselves. And they had. I saw the photos. Smiling faces. Warm kitchens. Dishes I used to help make. No one looked sad in those pictures. I didn't expect them to. I made a turkey sandwich. Watched a marathon of old Clint Eastwood movies. Took a walk in the afternoon, crunching through the frost-coated leaves along the sidewalk. A family 2 doors down was tossing a football in the yard. Their laughter echoed between the houses. It felt like another planet. That night, I went through the garage and found a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a stack of cassette tapes, recordings I used to make back when we had a camcorder the size of a toaster. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, our first dog barking at a snowman. I found one labeled July 2003, backyard barbecue, and popped it into the old player. There we were. Younger. Louder. Margaret wearing a sundress, holding a red plastic cup, laughing as Jason squirted ketchup all over his shirt. Mark ran circles around the picnic table with a super soaker. I was manning the grill, joking about burning the burgers. I watched the screen like I was spying on someone else's life. Margaret looked happy. And I hated her for that. Hated how easy it was to forget where it all ended up. Hated that the version of her I loved was frozen on that grainy tape, untouched by time, by lies, by conference room hotel keys and "I miss you already" texts. I turned it off halfway through. The next day, I called Mara again. It had been a while since we last spoke. No texts. No check-ins. Just 2 strangers floating in the same grief current, drifting. She picked up after 2 rings. "Hey," I said. "You got a minute?" There was a pause. "Yeah. I do." We met at a little diner just off Highway 42, the kind with wood-paneled walls and pies displayed in a rotating glass case by the register. She wore a long beige coat, her hair tucked into a loose braid. I didn't recognize the perfume, but it wasn't sweet, more earthy, like cedar and something smoky. We sat in a corner booth. She ordered coffee and lemon pie. I went for meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Comfort food for people who couldn't find comfort anywhere else. We talked for 2 hours. About everything. She told me Elliot had resigned before the board could make a final decision. Said he was planning to move to Michigan, live near his brother, figure things out. She said it like it left a bitter taste in her mouth. He said he still loves me, she told me, stirring her coffee absently. Said he made a mistake and that he wants to work it out. I didn't say anything. I told him I need a long time, she added. Maybe forever. I nodded. Then it was my turn. I told her about the letter. About the Thanksgiving sandwich. About the home videos. You ever feel like you were the only one holding the picture frame? I asked. Like they were already out of the photo, and you were just too focused to see it? She blinked. Yeah. That's exactly what it feels like. The check came. I paid before she could argue. When we stepped outside, it had started to snow. Just a light dusting, like powdered sugar. The air was sharp, clean. Everything looked softer, like the world had been wrapped in cotton. She stood next to her car, hands in her pockets. Thanks for today, she said. It helped. Me too. Then she hesitated. Looked up at me. You know, she said slowly, some people, they don't cheat because they stop loving you. They cheat because they stop loving themselves. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. She got in her car and drove away. I stood in the parking lot a while longer, watching the snow melt against the pavement. Thinking about her words. About Margaret. About all the ways I had blamed myself. Wondering which parts of me she forgot to love. Wondering if I'd ever know. That night, I got home and lit a fire in the living room. Not because it was cold. Just because I wanted to hear something crackle. I poured a glass of bourbon and sat in the glow, letting the warmth reach my fingertips. And for the first time, I didn't picture her coming back. I didn't imagine fixing it. I just sat in the stillness, and let it be what it was. A life scorched. But not destroyed. It was almost Christmas when the first real snowstorm hit. I woke up to silence, the kind you only get after a night of heavy snow, thick, padded, still. I looked out the window and saw the neighborhood blanketed in white. Driveways buried, branches bowed under the weight, and tire tracks disappearing into the distance. Everything looked untouched, like the world had paused just long enough for me to catch my breath. I made coffee. Toasted a slice of cinnamon raisin bread. Sat in the armchair by the window with a blanket over my knees like some old man in a postcard, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was just passing time. There was something peaceful about the snow. Not happy, peaceful. There's a difference. Happy feels loud. Peaceful feels earned. A knock on the door startled me. It was Jason. My oldest. He stood there on the porch in a heavy parka, his beard frosted at the edges, holding a suitcase in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. "Merry early Christmas, Dad," he said with a smile. I blinked. "You drove through that storm?" "Flew in last night. Rented a car this morning. I figured I'd surprise you." I stepped aside and let him in. The warmth rushed in behind him like an old friend. We didn't hug right away. We are not that kind of family. But we patted shoulders and smiled awkwardly, which was just as good. He unpacked the bag, eggs, bacon, pancake mix, 2 bottles of whiskey, and a 6-pack of his favorite IPA. "You cooking?" I asked. He laughed. "Not unless you want raw butter and smoke." We sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. He glanced around the house, at the empty coat hook where Margaret's jacket used to hang, the single mug in the drying rack, the half-finished bench in the hallway. "Place looks quiet," he said gently. "Yeah," I replied. "It's been that kind of year." He didn't press. Just nodded. Later that afternoon, we put up the old artificial tree from the attic. Half the lights didn't work, and one of the branches had a chunk missing, but we propped it up anyway. I found the box of ornaments, glass balls, plastic snowflakes, a felt reindeer mark made in 2nd grade, and we decorated in silence, save for the faint hum of the radio playing Bing Crosby. "Mom used to hang these," Jason said, holding up a tiny Santa with a broken beard. "Yeah," I said. "She did." He looked at me for a long time. "You ever gonna tell me what happened?" I hesitated. Then I told him. Everything. I told him about Elliot. The emails. The hotel rooms. The confrontation. The boxes at the door. The letter. The silence that followed. He didn't interrupt. Didn't flinch. Just listened, his eyes fixed on the blinking lights of the half-dead tree. When I was done, he leaned back and exhaled. "Jesus." "Yeah." There was a pause. "I always thought you two were solid," he said softly. "So did I." He rubbed his face. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," I said. "I didn't tell you to get sympathy. I just didn't want to lie anymore." He nodded. "Do Mark and Chloe know?" "No." "I didn't want to dump that on them during the holidays." He seemed to respect that. We made dinner together, nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and garlic bread from the freezer. Afterward, we sat on the couch, watching football, nursing glasses of bourbon. "Are you okay?" he asked eventually. I thought about it. About what that word really meant. "No," I said. "But I'm not drowning anymore." He smiled. "That's something." We didn't say much after that. He stayed the weekend. We went to the hardware store. Fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. Shoveled the driveway together, laughing when he slipped and landed flat on his back like he was 8 years old again. We didn't talk about Margaret. We didn't have to. Her absence was already loud enough. On Sunday night, before he left, he hugged me at the door. A real hug this time. Tight. Lasting. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Even if you don't feel strong, you are." I didn't reply. Just held on a moment longer. After he left, I stood on the porch for a while, watching his taillights disappear into the snow. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and cold. I looked up, exhaled into the night, and whispered, "I'm still here." Then I turned off the porch light and went inside. Not because I was giving up, but because I was finally ready to start over. New Year's Eve came quietly. No noise, no countdowns, no glitter-covered hats or party horns. Just me, sitting on the porch in a wool sweater, watching the final sun of the year disappear behind the rooftops across the street. The air was sharp, filled with the smell of wood smoke and frost. Somewhere nearby, someone was grilling, yes, grilling, in 32-degree weather. The scent of charcoal and sizzling meat drifted in the wind like a memory of summers long gone. Inside the house, the clock ticked like it had something to prove. I didn't turn on the TV. I couldn't stomach the forced joy of New York crowds counting down to something that would feel exactly the same as the night before. I thought about Margaret. About where she might be. With friends? Alone in a hotel room somewhere? Drinking champagne with the man who helped unravel the life we built? Then I stopped. Because it didn't matter. That realization was slow, but it hit me like a wave once it finally landed. I wasn't her anymore. I wasn't us anymore. I was just me. And maybe that was okay. I opened a bottle of bourbon, not the cheap kind, but the bottle I'd been saving for no reason in particular. The one she bought me 3 birthdays ago when we went to Asheville for the weekend. Back then, we spent hours walking through art galleries, pretending to care about brushstrokes and color theory, when all we really wanted was each other's company and good food. We ate shrimp and grits under string lights and held hands across the table like we were teenagers. Funny how the best memories are the ones that hurt the most after. I poured a glass and raised it to the empty room. "To new beginnings," I said aloud. The glass clinked gently as I set it down. Midnight came without fanfare. Just a few distant pops of fireworks. A dog barking once, then silence again. I didn't cry. I didn't toast. I just sat in the stillness and let the year die without dragging the pain forward. The next morning, I woke up early, before the sun, before the coffee pot started its programmed brew. I went out to the garage and uncovered a piece of cherry wood I'd been saving for years. I had no plan. No sketch. Just the urge to create something. To build, instead of rebuild. By noon, I was sanding the first edge. Letting the sound of the machine drown out the noise in my head. There was something sacred about it, watching the rough surface become smooth, clean, fresh. It reminded me that things can be made new. Not the same. Not restored. But new. Later that week, I got a message from Mara. She'd moved. Some small town near Lake Erie. Said she found a little house near the water and started painting again. Attached a photo of a canvas she'd finished, a stormy seascape with heavy brushwork and a single sailboat pushing through the gray. "I think I'm that boat," she wrote. I stared at the painting for a while. Saved the image to my computer. Wrote back one word. "Sail." She responded with a heart. I never imagined I'd find understanding in the wreckage, let alone from the wife of the man who helped destroy my marriage. But grief does strange things. It carves people hollow, makes room for unlikely connection. We didn't talk every day. Just enough to remind each other we were still afloat. One day, while cleaning out the spare bedroom, I found a showbox full of Margaret's letters. Not recent ones. Old ones. Some from our early dating years. Others from when I was working long hours and she'd slip notes into my lunchbox. One read, "I miss you even when I'm looking right at you." I sat on the floor and read every single one. Let the memories come, one by one, like waves against the side of a boat. Then I closed the box. And I didn't cry. Because something inside me had shifted. I was no longer mourning her. I was mourning the man who used to believe those words. But he was gone too. And in his place, someone else was starting to emerge. Someone quieter. More patient. Still a little broken, sure. But real. That night, I made dinner, baked salmon, roasted carrots, a side of wild rice. I set the table for one, lit a candle anyway. Played Miles Davis in the background. Ate slowly, with intention. When I finished, I stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, washing each dish by hand. And I thought, this is what healing looks like. Not loud. Not fast. Just, steady. Piece by piece. Like woodworking. You take something raw. Rough. Splintered. And you shape it with care. Until one day, you look at it and say, it's not what it was, but it's something beautiful now. And then you keep going. It was mid-January when I finally took off my wedding ring. There wasn't a dramatic moment. No tears, no ceremony. Just me, standing in the bathroom after shaving, looking at my reflection under the dim light above the mirror. The ring felt heavy, tighter than usual, maybe because of the cold, maybe because I'd started noticing it more. Like it didn't belong anymore. I twisted it gently, pulled it off, and set it on the edge of the sink. It made a small, metallic sound when it touched the porcelain. Quiet, but final. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't throw it away. I didn't smash it or bury it. I just left it there for the rest of the day, like a placeholder for everything I was letting go. That afternoon, I went into town. I hadn't been out much since Christmas, aside from the occasional trip to the grocery store or the hardware shop. The cold had gotten deep, curling into your bones kind of cold. But the streets were clear, and I needed something, a change of scenery, a distraction, maybe even a reminder that the world was still moving. I stopped at a local bookstore I used to visit with Margaret years ago. Back then, we'd browse for hours. She'd drift toward poetry and literary fiction, and I'd always end up near the shelves with historical nonfiction and old war memoirs. We'd meet up at the register, argue over who was buying more, and leave with bags full of books we half finished before shelving. The store still smelled the same, paper, wood, and that faint trace of something citrusy they must use for cleaning. I walked slowly between the aisles, trailing my fingers along the spines. A few new faces worked the counter. The older man who owned the place wasn't there. Maybe he retired. Maybe he was just out to lunch. I ended up in the back corner, flipping through a photography book of old Appalachian towns. Grainy black and white shots of miners, trains, storefronts long abandoned. Something about the images stuck with me, their starkness, the raw way they captured hardship without trying to make it poetic. A woman brushed past me at one point, apologizing softly. She wore a thick scarf and smelled like sandalwood. Her eyes met mine for half a second. Kind, but unreadable. She moved on without a second glance. And I stood there, holding the book, realizing something. I didn't feel hollow anymore. Not full. But not empty, either. I bought the book. I went home and, for the first time in a long while, didn't walk into a quiet house with dread. I made a sandwich. Sat down. Read a few chapters. The hours passed, and nothing felt urgent or missing. Later that night, I got a call. Not from Margaret. From Chloe, Mark's wife. "Hey, Dan," she said, her voice light but a little hesitant. "Hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all," I said. "Everything okay?" Yeah. Mark and I were talking. We're thinking of coming out in March. Maybe for a long weekend. We could help around the house. Maybe stay at that little B&B down the road. Would that be all right? I blinked. Yeah, I said. Of course. I'd love that. Good, she said, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath. Mark wasn't sure if you'd be up for company. Tell him I said he's an idiot, I replied, smiling. She laughed. Will do. After we hung up, I sat there for a minute, holding the phone, staring at the floor. It's strange how grief dulls your appetite for connection, makes you think you're better off alone. But maybe we're not meant to rebuild ourselves in isolation. Maybe that's just what we tell ourselves when the noise inside gets too loud. The next day, I called Ben, the old work buddy who'd gone through his own divorce years ago. We hadn't talked since the diner lunch back when everything first fell apart. He picked up on the first ring. Damn, thought you were dead, he said, laughing. Close, I replied. But not quite. We talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. About a fishing trip we never took. About how we both still hate the taste of kale, no matter what the doctors say. He told me about a woman he met recently, someone he wasn't trying to impress, which is probably why she stuck around. She's not a model, he said. She laughs too loud and curses like a trucker. But hell, I like that. Sounds real, I said. It is. That word stayed with me. Real. Not perfect. Not shiny. Just honest. I hung up feeling lighter again. Later that week, I picked up the ring from the bathroom sink and put it in an old watch box in the drawer beside my bed. Not because I wanted it back. But because it was a part of my story. And you don't erase the chapters that hurt, you just stop rereading them. I crawled into bed that night, pulled the blanket up to my chest, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man surviving. I felt like a man living. And that was enough. February came in like a bruised sky, low, grey, heavy. The kind of weather that makes your breath hang in the air and your joints ache before you even get out of bed. I started sleeping with the curtains open just to let some light in, even if the sun barely showed its face. It helped, somehow. Gave the mornings a softer kind of honesty. One Tuesday, I took the truck out to a nearby trailhead just outside of town. Nothing big, just a few miles of packed dirt winding through a forest preserve. The snow had melted back enough to reveal patches of dead leaves and muddy slush. I wore my hiking boots and an old beanie I'd forgotten I owned, one Margaret used to steal when her ears got cold. As I walked, I breathed deeper than I had in weeks. The air was sharp with pine and something faintly metallic, like wet stone. Squirrels darted between trees, and somewhere off in the distance, I heard a woodpecker hammering away. It reminded me of summers from my boyhood, when I'd wander through the woods behind my parents' house and pretend I was tracking something important. About halfway down the loop, I stopped at a bench overlooking a shallow creek. The water was moving fast, bits of ice clinging to the rocks. I sat and listened. Let the cold settle into my bones without rushing to fight it. A couple passed behind me, holding hands. Middle-aged. Laughing about something quietly, their voices wrapped in layers of scarves and wool. I didn't feel jealous. Just observant. Noticing the way they leaned into each other. The way his thumb moved across the back of her glove without thinking. It made me wonder if Margaret had ever touched Elliot like that. Not sexually, emotionally. The small, wordless connections. The instinctual stuff. Because that's what hurts the most after betrayal. Not the act itself, but the intimacy. The knowing. The giving of yourself to someone else in quiet ways you once promised were mine. I stayed there until my toes went numb. On the way back to the truck, I thought about how strange healing really is. It never happens the way you expect. It doesn't arrive in waves. It creeps in quietly, disguised as routines. As ordinary days that don't feel like war anymore. That night, I got home and made a stew, beef, carrots, potatoes, bay leaf. The smell filled the house, rich and familiar. I used to make it for us on snow days. She always added too much salt, I'd tease her for it. I let it simmer while I listened to an old jazz record, then ate at the kitchen table, staring out at the porch light flickering against the falling snow. Halfway through the bowl, I smiled. Not because I was happy. But because I wasn't aching. That was enough. The next day, I got a message from Mara. It was short. Just wanted to say, thanks. For not being bitter. For listening. For surviving out loud. I didn't know what to say to that. I stared at her words for a long time, replaying them in my head. Surviving out loud. That hit deep. Maybe that's all I'd been doing. Maybe that's what we all do when the person we trusted the most breaks us, we survive out loud. In messy ways. In quiet breakfasts and long walks. In dusty workshops and burnt coffee and unspoken forgiveness. In letters we don't send. In photos we refuse to delete. I wrote back. Thanks for reminding me I wasn't alone. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later that week, I drove to the local donation center with 3 boxes in the bed of my truck. The last of Margaret's things, the ones she never asked for, never came back for. A stack of books, some winter scarves, a pair of snow boots she always said were too tight but kept anyway. I dropped them off, signed the form, and didn't look back. As I pulled out of the lot, I noticed an older man walking toward the door with a bag of clothes. He wore a denim jacket patched at the elbows and a hat that looked like it had stories to tell. Our eyes met for a second. He nodded. I nodded back. Like we were both men carrying things no one else could see. That night, I sat in the living room and started writing again. Not in a journal this time, on my old laptop. A document titled After the Fall. Just stories. Thoughts. Things I'd learned in the rubble. I wrote for 2 hours straight. It wasn't pretty. But it was honest. And maybe that's all anyone really needs to offer the world after surviving something like this. Honesty. That, and the quiet strength to keep going. Even when it's cold. Even when it's lonely. Even when the only person who truly understands is someone you never meant to know. It was a Friday morning in late February when the call came. I was in the middle of sanding a maple board in the garage, headphones in, John Prine playing low. The kind of song that fills the air without demanding too much from you. My phone buzzed on the workbench, screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Mr. Hawkins, a voice said. Female. Polite, but with that distant tone that meant she was reading from something. Yes? This is Lisa from Ridgeway Legal Services. I'm calling on behalf of Margaret Whitlow. Her last name. Not mine. She paused, letting the weight of that land. She's filed for divorce. We are reaching out to confirm receipt and provide you with the preliminary documents. I didn't say anything. Just stared at a half-finished cut in the wood, my hand still hovering above it. Mr. Hawkins? Yeah. Okay. Send whatever you need to. Would you prefer email or physical mail? Both. She confirmed the details, thanked me, and hung up. Just like that. Like it was no different than ordering pizza. I set the phone down. Turned off the sander. Sat on the stool near the back wall and let the silence wash over me. I thought I'd be angry. I wasn't. I thought I'd feel betrayed again. I didn't. What I felt was confirmation. That this chapter was finally over. Not because I'd wanted it to end this way, but because there was no other way it could. I stayed out in the garage most of the day, finishing the bench I'd started a few weeks earlier. It was simple, solid lines, no frills, just clean, sturdy craftsmanship. Something you could sit on without worrying it might break. That night, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't text the boys. I didn't call Mara. I didn't pour a drink or pace the living room or reread old letters. I just sat on the porch with a heavy quilt around my shoulders, watching the snow fall in lazy spirals. The next morning, I got up early and went through every drawer in the house. I collected every photo of Margaret and me, wedding albums, vacation snapshots, Christmas cards from neighbors who'd scribbled to Dan and Margaret in sparkly gel pens. I didn't tear them up. I didn't burn them. I just boxed them. Labeled the lid with a single word in black Sharpie. Before. I carried the box to the attic and left it there, next to the camping gear we never used and the broken toaster I never got around to fixing. It didn't feel like erasing her. It felt like setting her down. Later that day, I went to the hardware store to pick up a new drill bit. The kid behind the counter asked me if I was working on a project, and for the first time, I didn't hesitate. Yeah, I said. Building a bench for someone. Nice, he replied. You do custom work? Sometimes. I almost didn't catch it, but there was something in my voice, something unfamiliar. Confidence, maybe. Or just steadiness. Like a man who wasn't waiting for a bomb to drop anymore. On my way home, I stopped by the park. There was a bench near the pond, one of those older ones with rusted legs and peeling paint. I sat there for a while, watching ducks navigate the thin ice, their feet slipping a little as they waddled across the surface. A woman jogged past with a golden retriever. An older couple fed pigeons near the path. A teenage girl sat on a rock nearby, scribbling in a notebook with that furrowed brow focus that only comes with youth. And me. Just another man with time to kill and nowhere he needed to be. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My finger hovered over Mara's name. Then I called her. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, voice warm, if a little surprised. Everything all right? Yeah, I said. Just felt like hearing a familiar voice. You okay? Actually, yeah. I think I am. We talked for almost an hour. About everything and nothing. She told me about a painting class she was taking, how she spilled linseed oil on her new rug and spent 2 hours trying to Google how to get the smell out. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Before we hung up, she asked me something. Do you think you'll ever date again? I thought about it. About the idea of letting someone in again. Letting someone see the cracks, the scars, the ugly parts one usually keep tucked away. Maybe, I said. Not now. But, maybe someday. Yeah, she said. Me too. After the call, I sat in the truck with the heater running, watching the snow fall against the windshield. And for the first time since this whole damn thing started, I didn't feel like something was ending. I felt like something was starting. Not a romance. Not a rebound. Just a return. To myself. To peace. To possibility. March arrived, dragging its feet through melting snowbanks and muddy sidewalks. The days stretched a little longer. The sun hung around past 5. You could smell thaw in the air, earth and old leaves and distant rain, like the world had taken a long breath after holding it for too damn long. The divorce papers came on a Wednesday. Standard envelope. No embellishments. No handwritten notes. Just forms, printed in sterile black ink, and a thin blue sticky note from her attorney's assistant, "Please review and return at your earliest convenience." I didn't open them right away. Left the envelope on the table, next to a half-finished crossword and my coffee mug. Walked past it all day. Every time I glanced at it, it felt like a stranger waiting for me to acknowledge it. That night, I finally sat down and opened it. The language was cold. Businesslike. Petitioner and respondent instead of Margaret and Daniel. Irreconcilable differences. No children under 18. Division of marital property. It was all there, broken into clean paragraphs like it could be organized away, like decades of life together could be sorted and filed. What got me most was the line, "The marriage has suffered an irretrievable breakdown." Not a disagreement. Not a mistake. A breakdown. Irretrievable. I signed every page. No notes. No revisions. Just a signature in black ink. When I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door to mail the next morning, I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel rage. I felt quiet. Deep, necessary quiet. Like walking out of a building that had caught fire months ago, and finally realizing the flames were out. The next day, I mailed the documents, then drove out to the lumberyard to pick up some walnut for a new project. The guy who loaded it into my truck bed looked like he'd been up all night, eyes red, hands chapped. "Late night?" I asked. "Wife left," he muttered. "Took the dog, too." I nodded. "Hard season." He nodded back, like I was speaking in code only men like us could understand. When I got home, I turned on the radio, unpacked the boards, and lost myself in the rhythm of creation. There's something sacred about the first few cuts, how the saw bites into the wood, how the grain reveals itself under pressure. Like truth. It's always there. You just have to uncover it carefully. Around mid-afternoon, Jason called. "Hey, you heard from Mark?" he asked. "Not since last weekend." "Why?" "He said he's flying out next Thursday. He wants to surprise you." I chuckled. "Well, you just ruined that." Jason laughed. "He sucks at secrets." "I figured you'd both be out here soon," I said. "Chloe messaged me last week." Jason paused. "She did?" "Yeah. Wanted to make sure I was okay." "She's thoughtful." "She is," he said. "Honestly, I think she's been more worried about you than Mark has." There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "You really doing all right, Dad?" I leaned back against the wall, rubbing my thumb along a dent in the workbench. "I'm getting there," I said. "Not every day's easy. But they're not unbearable anymore." He didn't answer right away. Then, "We are proud of you." That hit harder than it should have. "Thanks, kid." We talked a bit more, nothing heavy. Just life stuff. Then he hung up, and I stood there in the garage, thinking about how odd it is, the way pain transforms. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't fix itself. It just changes shape. Becomes manageable. Like a limp you learn to walk with. That weekend, I went to the local farmer's market. I hadn't been since last summer. The same vendors were there, old Joe with his honey jars, the couple selling scented candles shaped like pine cones, the bakery stand with lemon bars that tasted like childhood. I bought fresh sourdough, a bag of roasted hazelnuts, and a jar of raspberry jam. On my way back to the truck, someone called my name. I turned around and saw her, Mara, smiling from beneath a wool beanie, a bag of apples in one hand, coffee in the other. "Well, look who crawled out of hibernation," she said. "Guilty," I replied. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, the way two people do when they're not sure how much of the past belongs to them anymore. "Wanna walk a bit?" she asked. We did. We talked about nothing, weather, vendors, the smell of kettle corn drifting through the air. At one point, a golden retriever bounded past us, leash dragging behind. We both laughed and moved instinctively in the same direction, like we were still tethered by something unspoken. Eventually, we found a bench near the river and sat down. She sipped her coffee. I cracked open the bag of hazelnuts. "So," she said, glancing at me sideways. "Is it done?" "Signed, sealed, mailed," I replied. She nodded. "Same here. Mine went through last month." We didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, watching the water roll past chunks of ice and broken branches. Then she said, "I'm proud of you." I looked at her. The same words Jason had said. The same tone. But this time, I didn't deflect. I just said, "Thanks." And I meant it. Because in that moment, sitting by the river, the winter air cold and clean, I realized something. I hadn't just survived it. I'd started to become someone new. And that man? He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was free. April rolled in quiet and pale, like the sky had forgotten how to be blue. Rain came often, long, thin curtains of it that blurred the windows and tapped on the roof like an old friend trying to say something. The grass started to green, almost in secret, and the forsythia bushes out front were dusted with yellow before I realized winter was over. One Sunday morning, I stood barefoot on the porch with a cup of coffee in my hand, watching steam rise from the mug and mix with the damp morning air. The neighborhood was still. You could hear birds. You could smell wet wood and new earth. I hadn't thought about Margaret in a few days. That surprised me. Not because I was trying to avoid her memory, but because, for the first time, it hadn't been the first thing I carried when I woke up. I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I'd been working on a piece, not quite a memoir, not quite fiction. Just something that helped me bleed out the words I'd swallowed for too long. That morning, I typed without effort. I wrote about the porch light that flickered for a year before I fixed it. About the smell of her shampoo on the pillowcase long after she left. About how silence in a house isn't always loneliness, it's sometimes peace, too. I didn't care if anyone read it. That wasn't the point. The point was, I was still writing. Still creating. Still breathing. That week, I finished the walnut bench I'd started in February. It was clean, smooth, strong. I loaded it into the truck and drove it over to the community center near downtown. A friend of mine volunteered there, helping veterans with resume workshops and housing support. They needed new furniture for the reception area. When I dropped it off, the guy at the front desk, a Marine with a sleeve tattoo and a limp, ran his hand along the top and whistled. "You build this?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It's solid," he said. "Real solid." I nodded. "It'll hold." And that meant more to me than he could have known. Later that week, Mark and Chloe came into town. They brought wine, fresh bagels from some trendy shop in Denver, and a box of old photos they'd found while packing up a closet. We spent an entire afternoon around the dining table, laughing at terrible fashion choices from the 90s, arguing about who took what picture, and quietly skipping over the ones with Margaret in them. Chloe pulled me aside later. "You doing okay, really?" I looked around the house. At the light streaming in through clean windows. At the bookshelf I'd finally dusted. At the new coat of paint in the hallway. The soft jazz playing on the record player. The lemon tree on the windowsill that somehow hadn't died yet. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'm more than okay." She hugged me, and for the first time, I let myself lean into it. Mark stayed up late with me that night. We sat on the back porch with 2 glasses of bourbon and no expectations. The moon was low, full, the clouds thin and quick-moving. A fox ran across the yard once, startled by our laughter. "You know," he said, "when everything went down, I didn't know how to talk to you." I didn't know how to talk to myself, I admitted. He took a sip. "But I'm glad you let us in." "Me too." There was a long pause. Then he said, "You're different now." "Not worse. Just lighter." That stuck with me. Lighter. I'd been carrying so much for so long I forgot what it felt like to just be. When they left Sunday morning, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. That evening, I walked down to the park, the same one where I'd sat after signing the divorce papers. Spring had worked its magic, everything bloomed, slow and bright. Couples walked hand in hand. Kids kicked soccer balls across the lawn. Someone played guitar near the fountain. The world had unfurled while I wasn't looking. I sat on a bench. Not the one I built, just an old city bench, a little rusted, a little crooked. A woman sat down beside me after a while. Probably mid-50s. Short, silver hair. Jeans and a navy raincoat. She had a paperback in one hand, a paper cup of tea in the other. We didn't speak right away. Just sat there, side by side, like 2 people who knew not to interrupt quiet when it's doing good work. Then she looked over and said, "You come here often?" I smiled. "Not as often as I should." She nodded. "It's nice. Peaceful." "Yeah," I said. "It is." We didn't exchange names. We didn't need to. Not yet. We just shared a bench, and a moment, and the kind of silence that feels like a beginning, not an end. When I got home, I made tea. Lit a candle. Sat in the living room with the windows cracked open. And for the first time in nearly a year, I didn't feel like I was fixing what broke. I felt like I was building something new. It was a year to the week since everything started unraveling. I didn't mark the date on the calendar. I didn't need to. My body remembered, like a scar just under the skin that tingles when the weather shifts. But this time, the ache was dull. Familiar, but no longer sharp. I woke early, as usual, just after 6. The house was quiet, but not heavy. The spring sun filtered through the blinds in soft gold lines. Outside, birds had already begun their morning declarations, and I could smell damp earth through the cracked bedroom window. I made coffee, standing barefoot in the kitchen, feeling the cool tiles under my feet. The coffeepot sputtered gently, and I watched the steam rise, curling into the quiet like it belonged there. I didn't rush to check my phone. Didn't turn on the TV. Just stood still for a while, hands wrapped around the warm mug. After breakfast, I took a drive. Not out of restlessness, but because the road had become something of a sanctuary to me over the past year. The way it stretched out ahead, unfolding, uncertain, alive. I found an old bluegrass station on the radio, the kind that crackles in and out depending on the hills, and let the sound carry me north. I ended up at the lake. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. The water was still, like glass, broken only by the occasional breeze or floating duck. There were only a few people around, some joggers, a couple walking a Labrador, a fisherman with a thermos and a folding chair. I walked the perimeter trail, the gravel crunching softly under my boots. Every turn brought something familiar, an old bench, a tree I used to sit under when Margaret was at her book club. I thought of her, but it didn't hurt. It felt distant, like a song you once loved that doesn't hit the same anymore. Eventually, I came to the dock. It jutted out over the water, grey and weathered. I sat at the edge, legs dangling, the boards creaking under me. I watched ripples move across the surface and breathed deep, letting the scent of water and pine fill my lungs. And for the first time, I thought about me. Not the version of me she left. Not the one who begged for answers, or packed her things, or stared at empty chairs in a quiet house. The new me. The man who builds benches for community centers. Who writes stories just because. Who walks trails without needing to escape anything. I thought about the woman on the bench in the park, the one with the paperback and the raincoat. I'd seen her twice since then. We never exchanged numbers. Just sat, talked. Books. Music. Gardening. Life. She laughed with her eyes and listened like it mattered. It didn't feel like a beginning or an ending. It felt like something rare. Ease. And maybe that's what healing really is, not a breakthrough or a bright light. But the slow return to ease. To breathing fully. To looking in the mirror and seeing not what was taken, but what remains. I stayed by the lake for an hour before heading home. Back in the house, I opened the attic. Pulled down the box labeled before. Set it on the dining table. I opened it slowly. Inside were photos, anniversary cards, a dried flower from our wedding day, the ring she gave me at our 25th. I sifted through it all, one piece at a time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt grateful. Not for the betrayal. But for the years that were real. Because not everything was a lie. We had good years. We built things. Raised kids. Laughed. Loved. It ended badly. But it began honestly. And that mattered. I closed the box, taped it shut, and carried it to the storage shed out back. Not to forget it. But to make room for what came next. That evening, I grilled a steak on the back deck. Opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving. Played Sam Cooke on the outdoor speaker. Watched the sky go pink and purple as the sun dipped low. Then I lit a small fire in the pit and sat beside it. Alone, but not lonely. Still. Not because the world had stopped, but because I had finally caught up with myself. As the flames cracked and the stars appeared one by one, I leaned back in the chair I built with my own hands and whispered something out loud. Something I hadn't said yet, not really. Not fully. I forgive you. Not for her. For me. Then I added, softer. And I forgive me, too. The wind rustled through the trees. The fire kept burning. And I just sat there. No longer waiting. No longer wishing. Just living.